Hi, Nat5. So we are looking at the multicellular unit and control and communication in the body, and in particular hormonal control. So your nervous system is great for sending fast information and for gathering a lot of information from your external system to put into your brain. And it works incredibly well, but there is another system that you use to carry messages around your body, and that is your hormones. So hormones are a totally different system that works for different reasons. So if you want a longer acting response, then hormones are great. If you want it to be quite profound across lots of different tissues, these are really good. So how they work is they are chemicals. Okay, so they will have a particular shape. That's important for how you respond. They're produced in things called endocrine glands, and you just need to know the term endocrine gland. And it would be nice to have an example of it, and we're going to look in particular at the pancreas. Okay, carried in the blood. So they ooze out of these glands and then they're pushed round in the bloodstream. So they get to every single part of the body, but only the cells or the tissues which have receptors for that messenger, for that particular hormone, will respond. So that's all to do with protein shapes and things like that from cell biology. And what you'll get is a slower response, but it'll last for longer. So here's just a picture of the endocrine system. These are your main endocrine glands, and what we have is a particular one. The particular one that we're going to look at is the pancreas, so up in here. So this bit, the leafy shaped bit. Okay, so new term, physiological homeostasis. So physiological means that it's about our body, and homeostasis would basically mean keeping things the same. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the internal conditions of us are within certain levels, not too high and not too low. So for example, blood sugar. If that gets too low, then that causes real problems because you're not getting enough energy available for your cells. Too high, then it starts to damage your whole blood system because you've got too much soluble sugar, which means that you end up with a low water content in your sugar, which means that the cells would react by osmosis and remove some of their water, and it's just not good for us at all. Temperature, well, that's all linked to proteins, and too high certainly would be really dangerous for us because that means that we get denaturation of our proteins, and that means our enzymes stop working and our cell membranes will be damaged. Really not good. Too low, our reactions are too slow, and everything stops working. Okay, so temperature we are very, very carefully controlled at. Oxygen levels are quite obvious as well. Salts, ions, there's lots and lots and lots of things that you actually control all the time and you have no idea it's going on. So how it works is a system called negative feedback, and here's your general pattern. So we start off with whatever it is, temperature, water, whatever we need at the norm, so the normal set point, and then something happens. So if it's temperature, it could be that you actually move somewhere hot, or you might move somewhere cold. Okay, but there's an increase or a decrease in the factor. And then we have receptors, and this is important because if you can't tell that something's changed, you can't respond to it. So receptors pick up what's happened, and then those receptors send messages to effectors. So effectors we mentioned before in the nervous system. So effectors are things that make something happen. So those messages, they could be neural messages, so it could be a nerve signal, or it could be hormone signals. And obviously it's the hormone ones that we're looking at in here. The effector brings about a corrective response. So it basically means that the factor in the increase goes down and in the decrease goes up. Okay, and then we're back at the norm. Okay, so the reason why it's called negative feedback is you're going to do the opposite of what's happened. So something goes up, you bring it back down, something goes down, you bring it back up. Now you can kind of see what would happen. This would effectively mean that over time, if I was looking at this, it would go up, you'd bring it back down, it would go down too low, so you bring it back up, and then it's too high, so you bring it back down. And actually over time, what you have is this. And if you zoomed out, it just looks like a straight line. And that's what your body is doing all the time. It's really impressive. The one we're going to do in detail is sugar regulation. So two hormones involved here, insulin and glucagon. So inside your muscle cells and your liver cells, you store glucose as glycogen. Okay, I'm sorry, but glucagon, glycogen, glucose, I know they all sound very similar, but you have to get them all correct and they have to be spelt correctly. So glycogen can be moved into glucose, so we can release the glucose from it into free glucose, which we put into our bloodstream. Okay, the glucose can also be taken up and changed back into glycogen. So we can either release or store. So if we want to store it, we use insulin to make that happen. And if we want to release it, then we use glucagon to make that happen. Okay, so we've got the two movements. Okay, glucose to glycogen is triggered by insulin, and glycogen to glucose is triggered by glucagon. So if we use the same negative feedback pattern that we had before, here's your sugar concentration. Okay, something happens to increase the sugar concentration. So you eat a Mars bar or you drink something sweet, anything that would increase your sugar concentration. Okay, our receptors in the pancreas recognize that it's gone up, so they send a message. But what they're going to do is, it's gone too high, so I need to get rid of some of the sugar that's inside the bloodstream. So they're going to release more insulin. Okay, so our insulin is released, that's our message, and that goes to our muscle cells and our liver cells. They take glucose from the blood into the cells, so that means that we will drop the blood sugar back down, and we're now back to the norm. Okay, if that keeps going, then obviously we're going to end up with a decrease. Okay, the decrease could also be just because you're doing some exercise, using up sugar. So now our sugar has gone down, receptors in the pancreas again, but this time, instead of increasing the amount of insulin, they're going to increase the amount of glucagon. The glucagon goes to the cells which currently store the glycogen, get that to break down, release the glucose, and our glucose goes back into the blood and it goes back up to normal. That's your negative feedback loop for sugar. If it helps, and I quite like a little mnemonic, okay, insulin moves the glucose in. If you think about insulin taking glucose into the cells, so it's out of the blood. Okay, and I also quite like the help, my glucose is gone for glucagon. And that's it.